In 2022, inflation in the United States hit 9.1%. The Federal Reserve called it transitory. Economists debated supply chains. Politicians blamed corporate greed. But here's what nobody said out loud. Inflation doesn't hit everyone the same way. A millionaire who sees prices rise by 9%. Annoying. A single mother working 2 jobs who sees prices rise by 9%. Devastating. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. That's not a bug. It's not an accident. It's not even a side effect. It's structural. The way inflation works, the way it moves through an economy, is designed to protect wealth. And if you don't have wealth, you absorb the shock. This is the story economists don't tell you, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with what you've been told. Inflation is when prices go up. Everyone knows that. When inflation is high, your money buys less. A gallon of milk costs more. Rent goes up. Gas gets expensive. The standard explanation is simple. Inflation is bad for everyone. But that explanation is lazy. And it hides something important. Because inflation doesn't just raise prices. It redistributes power, chains. And the people who feel it most are not the people who talk about it on cable news. Here's a number that doesn't get enough attention. In the U.S., nearly 40% of adults couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. 40%. Now imagine inflation hits. Rent goes up $200 a month. Groceries cost $50 more per week. Gas jumps $1 per gallon. For someone living paycheck to paycheck, that's not just inconvenient. That's a crisis. But here's what makes this worse: the people at the top. They don't feel it the same way. Not because they're smarter. Not because they work harder. Because the structure of inflation itself protects them. Let me show you how. Inflation doesn't move through the economy like a wave. It moves like a ripple. And the closer you are to the source of new money, the less damage you take. This is called the Cantillon effect. It's named after an 18th century economist, Richard Cantillon, who noticed something strange. When new money enters an economy, it doesn't spread evenly. It flows to specific people first, chains, and those people get to spend it before prices rise. Here's how it works in practice. When the Federal Reserve wants to fight a recession, it doesn't just print money and hand it out. It buys assets, mostly bonds, from banks and financial institutions. That money floods into the financial system first. Banks get it. Hedge funds get it. Corporations get it. They use that money to buy stocks, real estate, and other assets. Asset prices go up. If you own assets, if you own a house, a stock portfolio, a business, you just got richer. But if you don't own assets, if you're renting, if you're living on a salary, you don't benefit from that first wave of money. You wait, and by the time that money trickles down to wages and consumer prices, inflation has already started. So the price of rent goes up. The price of food goes up. The price of gas goes up. But your salary, that adjusts later, maybe 6 months later, maybe a year later, maybe never. This is the part economists gloss over. They talk about inflation as an average. The inflation rate is 5%. The inflation rate is 9%. But averages hide everything. Because inflation for someone who owns assets is very different from inflation for someone who doesn't. One group sees their wealth grow faster than prices. The other group just sees prices. Let's do the math. Imagine two people. Call them Alex and Jordan. Alex makes $50,000 a year, rents an apartment, no savings, no stock portfolio, lives paycheck to paycheck. Jordan makes $200,000 a year, owns a home, has a retirement account, owns some stocks. Inflation hits 8%. For Alex, that means rent goes from $200 a month to $296. Groceries go from $400 a month to $432. Gas, utilities, everything, 8% more expensive. Alex's income, it might go up 3% if they're lucky, maybe 4%. So Alex is falling behind. Every month, a little more debt, a little less security. Now let's look at Jordan's. Jordan's salary might also go up 3 or 4%, but Jordan owns a house. That house was worth $400,000. With 8% inflation, it's now worth $432,000. Jordan didn't do anything. The house just became worth more. Jordan also has $100,000 in a stock portfolio. Stocks tend to rise with inflation. Not always, but often. Let's say the portfolio goes up 6%. That's $60,000 in gains. Jordan's wealth grew by $38,000 just from owning things. Alex's wealth, negative. Debt went up. Savings went down. Same inflation rate. Completely different outcomes. This is what economists don't say when they talk about inflation being transitory or manageable. Manageable for who? Here's where it gets darker. The Federal Reserve's job is to control inflation. When inflation gets too high, they raise interest rates. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive. That slows down spending. That cools the economy. Inflation drops. Sounds reasonable. But here's the problem. Raising interest rates hurts the people at the bottom first. When rates go up, mortgages get more expensive. Car loans get more expensive. Credit card debt gets more expensive if you're already living on the edge. Higher rates can push you over. But if you're wealthy, if you own assets outright, higher rates don't hurt you. In fact, they might help you, because now you can earn more on your savings. Bonds pay more. Treasury bills pay more. Wealth grows even faster. So the solution to inflation, raising rates, protects the people who were already protected and punishes the people who were already struggling. This isn't a conspiracy. It's not a secret plan. It's just how the system works. And the people who design the system, they own assets. The people who run central banks, they own assets. The people who write the laws, they own assets. So, when they talk about fighting inflation, they're not thinking about Alex. They're thinking about Jordan. Because Jordan is who they know. Jordan is who they are. This has been happening for decades. Every time there's a crisis, the response is the same. Flood the financial system with money. Prop up asset prices. Let inflation trickle down. After 2008, the Fed printed trillions. Stock markets soared. Real estate recovered. Wages, flat. After 2020, same thing. Trillions in stimulus. Markets hit record highs. Wages went up a little, but not as much as housing. Not as much as stocks. The wealth gap didn't shrink. It exploded. In 1989, the top 1% of Americans held about 23% of total wealth. By 2023, over 32%. That's not because they worked harder. It's because they owned things. And every time inflation hits, ownership becomes more valuable. The people who rent get poorer. The people who own get richer. The people who live on wages fall behind. The people who live on assets pull ahead. And the system calls this recovery. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Inflation doesn't hit everyone harder because the poor are bad with money. It hits them harder because the system is designed to protect wealth, not people, chains, and the people in charge of managing inflation. They benefit from the way it works. So the next time you hear an economist say inflation is under control, ask yourself, controlled for who? Chains. Because if you don't own assets, if you don't have wealth to protect, inflation isn't just a number. It's a transfer from you to them. And it's been happening the whole time.